to the Country Watch Political Intelligence Briefing Quick Hits, a weekly briefing of hot stories across the world in brief. I'm Denise Youngblood Coleman, the Chief Editorial Officer and Senior International Affairs Analyst at Country Watch. Russia continues to carry out its unprovoked and brutal attack in Ukraine, with accusations of war crimes mounting. At the start of April 2022, the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, was reported to have been liberated from Russian forces. The development came after a period of heavy fighting in the region that yielded mass devastation. Nevertheless, Ukrainian forces were able to beat back the Russian invaders, essentially consigning them into retreat. With Kyiv liberated, Russia was forced to recalibrate its goals and objectives in Ukraine. To that end, Russia intended to refocus its war efforts in the east and south of Ukraine, particularly in the Donbas region. The revised strategy aimed to take control of these regions in early May 2022. Russian President Vladimir Putin intended to host a military victory parade on May 9, 2022, to tout his success in Ukraine. For Putin, the victory parade was likely to be a nationalist exercise in selling the war as a success to Russians at home. In reality, however, Russia's long war in Ukraine promised to be a difficult and bloody one. The start of April 2022 was also marked by an effective genocide in Bucha, a suburb of the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. The mayor of Bucha said that 300 residents had been killed in the town by Russian forces, while Chechen fighters controlled the area. Heinous images of the brutal massacre by Russian forces in Bucha soon emerged. The images, including videos and photographs shown across multiple media platforms in the world, depicted corpses of residents. There were images of people who were bound and shot to death. These were images of there were also images of scores of bodies strewn in the streets of Bucha. There were images of mass graves. The imagery was a horrific collage and a visual record of the atrocities committed by Russian forces in Bucha. The deaths of these civilians were not via missiles or bombs, as one might find as collateral damage of a conventional war. Instead, these Ukrainians were killed using bullets, often to the back of the head, in direct contravention of the Geneva Convention. It was not surprising that the brutal massacre in Bucha was rapidly referred to as genocide. Indeed, it was an atrocity not seen in Europe since the Srebrenica massacre in Bosnia in 1995. Accordingly, world leaders were called for the prosecution of these horrific war crimes and crimes against humanity. There were also expectations that new sanctions would be added to already draconian sanctions imposed on Russia. Despite the clear visual record witnessed by news bureaus and seasoned journalists in the battlefield, Russia's defense ministry denied that its forces had killed civilians in Bucha and claimed that the deaths were staged by Ukrainian officials. That suggestion would not stand, as the former chief prosecutor of the United Nations War Crimes Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda called for the international arrest warrant to be issued for Russian President Vladimir Putin. Carla Del Ponte said that Putin was a war criminal and warned that he would one day face justice, just as had been the case for Slobodan Milosevic. Meanwhile, the West moved to isolate and punish Russia even further for its massacre in Bucha. Lithuania expelled the Russian ambassador, while Germany and France announced that several Russian diplomats would also be expelled. Already, the Netherlands, Belgium, Czech Republic had enacted expulsions of Russian diplomats over charges of espionage. Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia were set to close their borders from and to Russia and Belarus. That action would isolate Kaliningrad. The United States would seek Russia's suspension from the United Nations Human Rights Council. That actually happened. As well, United States President Joe Biden said that he would be seeking to impose further sanctions on Russia. These would be aimed at the Russian economy fueling the war effort in Ukraine. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden stopped short of referring to the massacre in Bucha as genocide, but reminded the world that his harsh characterization of Russian President Vladimir Putin as a war criminal was the truth. In other news related to Ukraine, China was accused of launching a cyber attack against Ukraine's military and nuclear facilities just ahead of the initial Russian invasion. It was unclear if the alleged cyber attacks by China were part of a collaboration between Beijing and Moscow. Some experts suggested such collusion was unlikely, since China's objectives in Ukraine were different from that of Russia. Quite likely, China was more interested in cyber espionage for the purpose of intelligence gathering rather than a full-blown cyber attack. On a related subject, former United States President Donald Trump urged Russian President Vladimir Putin to release unfavorable information on the Biden family. The request occurred during an interview with the right-wing Real America Voice network. Referring to Hunter Biden's business dealings in Eastern Europe, Trump indicated that Putin might have so-called dirt on United States President Joe Biden's son. Trump said, "I would think Putin would know the answer to that. I think he should release it." For his part, Hunter Biden has denied any wrongdoing regarding his business dealings in Eastern Europe. It should be noted that Trump has recently praised Putin, referred to the Russian dictator as savvy and a genius. It should also be noted that during the 2016 presidential campaign, Trump had asked Russia to hack and release emails of his former rival Hillary Clinton. Trump's request to Putin did not stop there. Trump was impeached by the United States House of Representatives for trying to extort Ukraine in an effort to procure damaging information about Joe Biden in the run-up to the 2020 presidential contest. That extortion attempt involved Trump withholding critical military aid from Ukraine as he pressed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to launch an investigation into Hunter Biden. Elsewhere in the world, a humanitarian ceasefire brought some good news to the Tigrayan region of northern Ethiopia, which had been in a state of war since late 2020. Finally, there was space for the flow of humanitarian aid to get to Tigray, and the first humanitarian aid convoys arrived in the region where a famine was raging. Across the world in Costa Rica, the second round of the presidential election took place. Neither of the two candidates making it to the second round were well regarded, and Costa Ricans seemed apathetic about both of them. Jose Maria Figueres had resigned as executive director of the World Economic Forum in 2004 amid accusations he had influenced state contracts with the telecom company Alcatel. Rodrigo Chavez Robles was campaigning as a political outsider with an anti-corruption message, but during his past tenure at the World Bank, he'd been accused of sexual harassment. Ultimately, it was Chavez who won the election with a lead of about 5 percentage points over Figueres, who conceded defeat. Parliamentary elections took place in Hungary on April 3, 2022. The election would feature a contest between the ruling Fidesz party, headed by long-term serving incumbent right-wing Prime Minister Viktor Orban, and the unified six-party opposition alliance headed by Peter Markizai. Because of the gerrymandered nature of constituencies, although the election was expected to be a highly contested one, the advantage resided with the right-wing Fidesz. As anticipated, results handed a strong victory to the hardline Prime Minister Orban. Also on my radar, the French election on April 3rd. This will be the first round of a two-round election process. Would incumbent Emmanuel Macron benefit from a fragmented left and a divided right to recapture electoral victory in France? Or would Marine Le Pen be given the benefit of the doubt, and with her momentum going, finally give the far right a victory? I'll also be covering an alliance between China and the Solomon Islands, food inflation protests in Peru, and I'm looking at a situation in Sri Lanka where there's an economic crisis deepening. There are also developments related to the January 6th inquiry, and finally, Ketanji Brown Jackson made history as the first African-American woman confirmed to the Supreme Court of the United States. The vote was 53-47, with 3 Republicans joining the full Democratic bench to confirm her. Subscribers can read more about these and other stories at the Country Watch website at www.countrywatch.com. As ever, have a wonderful day. Like to take this time to thank you for being an audience here. Remember, now more than ever, we live in an interconnected world.